Hey, this is Christian. I'm a filmmaker.
And I'm Ben, an animator.
Hi, I'm Kevin Carbino. I'm a music producer for Arma Puros, and welcome to the Up and Coming Artist Podcast.
And we hope you guys enjoy these samples of Kevin's music.
Thousands of years ago, they learned the hidden knowledge and left Earth long ago.
The origin was always here. It was always here.
Hey, Kevin, thanks for coming on, man.
Oh, you're welcome. So glad to be here.
Now, I want to start out this podcast by saying we have been friends for a long time. Do you remember when we met?
Barely. I remember when we met, but I don't remember what was said. It's been so long. It's kind of like the friendship's all a blur now.
Yeah. That was, do you remember the year? That was over, 10 years ago?
December 2007. So
Wow.
we're coming up on 12 years.
Wow.
Yeah,
It's been a good 12 years, man.
definitely.
Oh, that's awesome, dude. Well, for as long as we've known you, you've done art. So when we first met, you were drawing little blip comics.
That's right.
You had been playing the drums at our church back in the day. And then you got really into music and writing your own music. So that's what we want to talk about today.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I guess the first question that I'd be interested in is, what got you into music? Do you have a specific memory of when it was like, oh, wow, I really like this, for the first time? Or was it just something that was always in your life?
Yeah, so when I was a kid, I remember listening to Steve Green. He had a kid's album on a cassette tape.
Oh,
And
nice.
I remember almost every night I'd play that before bed. And funny story, we weren't really allowed to listen to flip the tape or rewind it. But I would get out of bed, walk across the room to the cassette tape player and pull the tape out, flip it over, put it back in and listen to more.
Dude, that's awesome.
Yeah, I remember at a very young age listening to music and singing music and singing while vacuuming. My mom had us start on chores from a pretty young age. I was probably 5 or 6 when she started me vacuuming the house and stuff. So yeah, and then growing up, always singing, and my mom would comment that, we never really hear you sing the whole song, just the melody at a time. You're always all over the place. I'm singing the bass. I'm singing the high notes. I'm singing the other stuff, so I get a taste of all the instruments. And one of the first times my mom heard me sing was when I took a vocal class at school. And my mom actually cried during my performance because she had never heard my normal voice just singing one thing at a time.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. That's great.
Now, was that in Ukraine? Because that's where you grew up, right?
Yeah, so nutshell, I lived in America until I was 6.5. And then we moved to Ukraine before my 7th birthday. And we lived there from 99 till 07. So it was a really big chunk of my life and honestly major impact on my life, really good experience living there. Then we got back to America late 2007.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Dude, that's great. So you were singing around the house while you were doing chores. How did that transition into you getting into the kind of music that you do now? And how would you even describe it? It's like electronic music?
Yes.
I sound like such an old guy.
Music. Yeah, I try to make my songs to put it in a genre. I'm kind of progressive electro house.
Okay.
So
Okay.
house music typically just four on the floor, drum beats and stuff. But anyway, to answer your question, like how I got into it, I used to draw like all the time. You guys know that.
Yeah.
And one year I started having a mental health disorder. I lost my job. I was stressed with summer classes, doing a math class, way too much math too fast. I really like math, but not that much. And so
Yeah,
like I
that's
got really
fair.
stressed out. I lost a ton of weight. I was like as tall as I am now, I was 6'5", and I was 125 pounds.
Oh my
Yikes.
gosh.
Anyway, long story short, I ended up in the hospital for about 17 days, and I got on some medication which helped calm me down. And it's called a kind of a psychosis, kind of delusional, where you kind of in paranoia and stuff like that. So it's really weird.
Yeah.
Then once I was on medication, I gradually got better, and I started going to therapy and stuff. So to segue from that into music, the medication inhibited my ability to draw. I lost a lot of fine motor control in my hands from the medication. I was like, I need a new hobby. So I hopped on my grandma's computer because I didn't have my own computer at the time. I was living with my grandparents to take a break from living with family because I was having just I was really close to my family, and when things got weird for me, things got weird with my relationship with them. So it's better that I took a break from living with them for a time.
Yeah.
So that was that. And then I started writing chiptune music on my grandma's computer.
Oh, nice.
Nice.
And what is chiptune music?
So if you imagine an old Game Boy, the music you'd have for that, that's kind of like chiptune music.
Oh, got it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Oh, yeah, kind of like an 8-bit, 16-bit
Right.
kind of stuff.
Really
yeah.
basic. So the software came with two synthesizers, and you had 10 tracks, and you could mix it and stuff. So I did that, and I did that for about a year. And then I was like, okay, I think I'm serious about this. I'm going to buy some real software. So thankfully I had a job to pay for it. So I got Ableton, and I bought software from Native Instruments, if you've heard of
Nice.
them.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
So how did you get connected to those softwares? Was it you researching online and being like, how, to make house music, or how did that come about?
So at the time I was a big Skrillex fan, if you guys have heard of him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now he's
And-
dubstep, right?
Yes. And I somehow found out that he was an Ableton enthusiast. So that's why I got Ableton. I tried Fruity Loops, but the workflow was a little bit challenging for me. So I kind of just went with the first digital audio workstation I clicked with the best, and Ableton won. So yeah.
Nice.
And then Skrillex told a story once about how in his early days of music, how he was like trying to make new sounds and stuff. And he was a big fan of Noisia. It's like I think it's a 3-guy band. They write really interesting electronic music. Skrillex heard that they use this program called FM8, which is a frequency modulation software where you can actually, you take a sound, for instance, like a sound wave, and you can run another sound wave through that sound wave and create feedback that way.
Oh,
So
okay.
electronically, the signal is being manipulated by different sounds.
Yeah.
Right. It's like running it through an effects pedal or something, right?
Yeah.
In a way.
So let me like do an illustration like this. So you have a light bulb, right? And you run a red color through it, and its light is red. And then you run a green through it too, and it starts to turn yellow.
Gotcha.
So imagine if you do that with sound, you'd have one sound, and then you run another sound through, and it gets brighter and more interesting, and you start adding harmonics to it, which makes it even more interesting. There's little tricks and stuff you can do.
Oh,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Super cool. So do you have any like physical modules that you like to use, or are you doing everything through plugins?
Yeah, I would love to have a synthesizer,
Yeah.
but I tend to do everything with VSTs,
Gotcha.
virtual synth instruments. Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool.
Well, that's exciting, man. And I didn't want to get away from this too quickly because when I knew you, and and still do, but we don't hang out as much anymore. You were playing, piano and drums and things like that, and kind of, maybe more what you could say is more like traditional style of music. So, what is it about like Skrillex and house and these things that drew you to them?
Yeah, so it was kind of like a toss up between Owl City and Skrillex. Owl City was a type of artist who'd put out an album every so years, and Skrillex was putting out more music at the time when I was starting to get into music. So I think the cool thing with electronic music was I didn't have to rely on the technique of my hands to make up stuff. I could
Gotcha.
just click it in, listen to it over and over, see if I liked it, and make changes accordingly. Um, Compared to using a piano to compose, like when if I were to try to compose something on a piano, I'd kind of like fall into little things that I always do all the time that I kind of get boring. But with with a sequencer, MIDI sequencer, I can click whatever I want. It doesn't matter how far away the notes are from each other or how fast they're playing. And after doing it for a long enough time, I kind of have a feel for what to do to kind of get what I want. And now the strategy is to write enough stuff, and eventually I'll stumble upon the right chord progression that works. Because one of my biggest goals is to write music that's repeat proof, that you can listen to like over and over and over and not get tired of it. So I write. That's one of my main goals in writing music is like I don't want to be bored listening to this music for the 100th time. I want to still enjoy it by then.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So, are there like techniques that you would suggest to people who are interested in the same field of how to keep your tracks interesting enough, keep their brains engaged with the melodies, with all the different levels?
So surprisingly enough, sometimes the biggest information input for music would be non-musical activities, in my opinion. So like reading, going to school, stimulating your brain, talking to people, meeting people, working a job, stuff like that. And I think for me, I'm almost more inspired by film than I am by music. Because like you watch a really cool movie like Transformers or Passengers or even like Lego movies, like you get those good feelings, and then you go write music and you feel good, so that kind of comes out through your music. Because when you listen to music, isn't it about we listen to the music we listen to because we like the way it makes us feel?
So you would say that the best piece of advice for writing music would be to almost expand your horizons artistically.
Yeah, be a Renaissance man.
So when you're creating your own songs and you're composing, you kind of talked about it a little bit, but what's your process from start to finish? Like, okay, do you have an idea for a song and you go with that? Or is it just finding chord progressions, putting them together? How does that go about?
So for me, it's basically I open up the software, and this is like the first year that I actually made my own template to start with. Just a blank template with empty MIDI clips, and I used to always start from bare bones, like nothing. You just right click in a certain area, a little box appears, and you drag and drop it into the sequencer.
Yeah.
Ableton has two modes. That kind of has a live mode and a sequencer mode. So I don't really use the live mode that much because you like trigger groups of clips at a time as desired. So that's the nitty and gritty about that. And then what I usually do is I'll start writing something, a bass line or a melody, whichever one comes first. And then it's kind of like at that point, it's just a big musical Sudoku puzzle. I just start filling in the gaps. I start layering. I start adding strings. I add drums. Yeah.
And those are all built into the program, right?
Yeah. So Ableton is cool because you have your music tools, like the actual things where the sound comes from, installed somewhere in your computer, and Ableton kind of accesses those and creates like a bridge for you to use them.
Awesome. So I
yeah.
would like to go back to something else that you said. Sorry if this is a little bit of a sidetrack, but you mentioned that it's like solving a Sudoku puzzle, right? So, and I wonder if that goes back to you saying earlier that you do enjoy math to a degree. And I think that a lot of people who enjoy math also enjoy doing Sudoku puzzles. So do you think that there's a connection there between some math skills and some music skills?
Most definitely, because you're using a computer anyway, and computers are mostly built on math and coding and stuff. So yeah, I think there is a connection. And when I showed my dad what I do on the music, he's like, yeah, this is a lot like what I do at work. In a certain way, because he uses Excel by Microsoft. You write something and you're like, oh, can this go this way? Can this go that way? And you kind of try stuff. Usually for me, some of the best songs I've written, I kind of write in one sitting and then add a little bit of stuff to it later.
Gotcha.
Hopefully the part that I make first turns out to be a bigger puzzle than I think it can be, because it seems like the foundation of the melody. So for example, just to like cut myself off there and talk about something else.
No,
One
that's cool.
time I was designing a patch to be played live by a keyboard. And what I made it do was I made it deeply constructed FM8 patch. And what it was made for was so that while you're playing on the keyboard, you could turn knobs and change the character of the sound. What I didn't realize in making that patch was that the chord progression I wrote for it would turn into one of my favorite songs of all time.
Oh, wow. So it was kind of by accident, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. What song is it?
It's called The Father Runs. It's on my latest album called Army of Sound. You can find that on Spotify and YouTube and SoundCloud.
Yeah,
Nice.
I've listened to it. It's got some voice stuff in there. Was that
Yes.
you?
No, but I got these vocal loops from. If you got any producers out there, check out Cymatics, CYMATICS.FM, CYMATICS.FM. They're really cool. They have a lot of patches and VST synth patch plugin stuff. And so they had these vocal loops that I used for that. So I kind of picked and choose what I wanted and kind of cut and paste them apart and stuff into what I wanted to make them fit the song and not kind of deviate to my style too much.
Nice. That's awesome, man.
For people who aren't familiar with creating their own songs and maybe musical programs, what would a patch, or how would you define a patch? I know you explained it a little bit, but if you could go into that a little more.
So let's pretend that your kitchen was a music production studio, and let's pretend that the stove is your synthesizer
Okay.
or your oven.
I really like these analogies.
Yeah, I love analogies because I'm kind of a natural teacher. I love explaining stuff. So you have a cookbook, right? And you find a recipe. The recipe is the patch.
Okay, gotcha.
So imagine if you could just click on the recipe and boom, everything was mixed together, and you put it in your oven and it's done.
Gotcha.
So you don't have to cook anything. You don't have to do anything. You just click on the recipe, boom, done, yum.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yum.
So do you go
awesome.
through now, you were talking about the template that you're using now. Is that basically like creating your own patch?
That's kind of different. I think I basically have an oven ready instead of building one from scratch every time.
Gotcha.
Ah, okay.
So
Gotcha.
I've got my oven ready to go. And I have four measure clips and 2 8-measure clips, each in their own tracks. So just in case the progression I write is long enough to fit in 8 measures, I put it in one of those clips because the clips are kind of formatted so that you can click notes in easily. It's kind of complicated, but yeah, a
Gotcha.
patch. You open up your synthesizer and you click on a setting. Another way to think about a patch is a setting.
Okay.
So you have your synthesizer, and Massive is fun because it's got a lot of colors in it, a lot of wheels and knobs with colors on them to show you what they're doing. In the synthesizer Massive, you can automate different knobs to do things by themselves, so you don't have to turn them while the music is playing.
Okay.
So you can like make a setting, drag and drop it on top of a knob, and the knob is controlled by the other setting, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And so for people who have never written a song before, such as myself, I would love to hear like a very brief rundown of like how you get a song from scratch or maybe from your template to the finished product. Like, what's the order that you do? You drop in notes, you figure it out, then do you run it through, different synths, or do you know what I mean, like modules or anything like that? Do you add effects on top? Like, what does that brief kind of writing process look like?
So the first thing that happens is I open up the software. and I start writing something. And if I want to be like super basic and lazy and just write something easy, what I can do is I did this recently. I took a harp sound and I just made one note play like over dun 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 dun.
Gotcha.
And then I added stuff on top of it and added around it. And the thing that I did, I kind of tagged it on to the end of the song to create more material, because I already had most of the idea of the song done. I wanted to add another idea that had the same chord progression, but added more melodic material to the song. So
Gotcha.
first thing that happens is typically composition, and then I get like maybe 5 things going, like strings, piano, synthesizer, bass, and drums, and then I'll EQ everything. So usually the thing you have to do is you have to EQ the bass out of a lot of your instruments so that there's not too much mud,
Gotcha.
because you need the bass room for the kick and the bass.
Right,
Okay,
and
gotcha.
not from, say, like another instrument that has those low notes as well, right?
Right. Because
Okay.
believe it or not, sounds are more dynamic than we'd think. There's more than just that one note playing. It's like all the notes are playing, just a couple of the frequencies are more prominent, so that's what you hear.
Gotcha.
Mm.
So when you play a note on a piano, it's resonating off the lower strings too.
Oh, gotcha.
I think.
Right, that makes sense.
Yeah. It's more resonating on the higher strings, but if you're to open an EQ and see what frequencies are playing, you can see that it's making lower sounds too. You just can't hear them.
Gotcha.
But
Oh.
when you put a bunch of those together, they all add up.
Oh, okay, and then it just becomes just noise rather than a design that you're trying to create.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
And then to continue on with Christian's question, so how do you get that original chord progression and composition into like something that you're happy with as a finish?
So transitions are important. So there kind of be a verse, chorus, bridge, chorus kind of format, kind of like pop music and stuff. That's what I try to do. And that way you have like your idea, then you have another idea which is more upbeat. So it depends on the melodic content of what you're writing. Sometimes I'll write something like, oh, that's a chorus, or that's a verse, oh, that's a hook or something.
Gotcha.
So then you add the drums and like swooshes and air stuff to make it more interesting, and like risers. And a riser is kind of like you have the song is going, and you kind of hear this thing in the background going.
Oh, yeah.
And that kind of
That's so
like
awesome.
gives the hint to the listener that something bigger is coming.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that I may or may not do in writing a song. Some songs are chill; they don't really have a ton of transitions, where there'll be like a drum beat, like a fill, like something more complicated to help the user or the listener kind of know that something else is happening next.
Gotcha.
Because I've listened to some of Taylor Swift songs, and sometimes her music like doesn't have any transitions. It moves into the next part, just like she's singing the verse, and then all of a sudden she's singing the chorus.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So it depends on what you want to do. So, it's cool with transitions, because some music, like you're writing, and you have a transition like every 2 or 4 measures.
Oh, wow.
Transitional type stuff, like a drum fill. Sometimes you'll hear EDM, electronic dance music, people use that technique. So if I'm writing, like I get the melody down, I'll like make different versions of it to make it interesting that follow each other in succession. And then I might write a chorus and add more instruments or different instruments, or change the chord progression for the chorus. And yeah.
That's cool, man.
Cool, man. So after you have that kind of initial composition done and you kind of have formed it into what you want, what would be the next steps of adding like interest to your tracks? Like, do you use effects? What do you kind of put into it after that?
So I would usually use effects to kind of shape my sound, and each one of the sounds that I'm doing, because some instruments sound good with distortion, some don't. On rare occasion, I'll add distortion to a piano. And then one of the things I think about when I'm mixing is like how loud my stuff is, because I need to leave myself enough headroom. Headroom is the amount of volume between 0 and however loud your song is playing, because digitally your track can only play as loud as your system like provides.
Gotcha.
Otherwise it starts to have distortion.
Gotcha.
So then I kind of will EQ the instruments a little more after I've written them, because I like to kind of have my arrangement down before I start nitty-gritty EQing the stuff, because if I'm writing the song and I'm not feeling it, I don't want to have spent a ton of time EQing everything when I could have been writing something else.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's
Yeah.
cool. Jinx, we're the same person, guest starring.
Yeah. So do you feel like then it's a worthwhile practice to step back and take a critical look at your work? Is there like a point in your process where you're like, now's the time to really make that judgment whether this is worth moving forward or whether it's time to abandon and start something else?
Yeah, I have a list of songs that I've written so far lately. I think the telltale thing is like where my heart is with the song. Am I still listening to the song? Do I want to show it to people? Do people like how it's going? Sometimes it's hard like to decide whether to show people a song or not before it's done, because doing that is dangerous, because you could get feedback on it that might halt your production of the song or turn it into a direction that you didn't originally intend.
Gotcha.
So it's usually smart to just keep the music to yourself until it's done and then show it to people.
Gotcha.
Like after you've kind of made all your own decisions, because that's part of what being true to yourself as an artist. You want to make what you want. You don't want to rely too much on what other people think. It might be helpful, but you're the one writing the music, so you should make your own decisions on that, unless you're doing a collaboration, which is a totally different story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome, man. So now we've talked about basically the creation of like a single song. So now you've released several albums as well as singles that people can check out on Spotify right now. But how do you go from, say, a single song to sort of a movement of songs or creating a whole album?
I'd have to say that I'm kind of surprised that there's been enough cohesion with the album so far, where each album has its own kind of sound, so to speak, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So in order to get enough songs that work on an album together, you have to write a lot of songs. And for me, that just means I have to write like 100 to 200 songs, ideas and stuff to make one album.
Wow, which typically has how many songs on it?
Like 10 to 12.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because I have different categories of songs that I write. I'm going to pull it up because I don't want to like waste time naming a bunch of songs that I won't actually use. I kind of name the file that the song is in by like what type of song it is. So I have chiptune stuff, I have guitar idea, piano and strings, piano and synth, piano down, which means piano down means just a kind of a more somber, melancholy piano. The Pluck song, soundtrack, Spaceship. Oh yeah, Spaceship.
I want to hear about Spaceship now.
Yes, Spaceship is fun. Making spaceship sounds is one of my favorite things about writing music, because having a spaceship sound in the background of your track just gives it this really cool vibe. I don't know if you guys heard He Is the Origin on the new album. Kind of if you listen closely, kind of has this fluttery, bassy kind of sound in the background kind of playing for a while.
Yeah.
And those typically take 1 to 2 hours to make.
Wow.
Yeah, I like to use Massive because Massive has a bunch of parameters that you can use to control other parameters. And sadly, lately I've forgotten how to do it because it's been so long.
Hey, that's all good. This is all of art is a learning process, right?
Yes. But the best I can remember, I remember sitting in my grandparents' dining room just in the dark working on a spaceship sound. So one of the things that happens is I have one control like a macro scrolling through like a pitch, so that the sound is going like boo, like really slowly. And then other parameters are doing that too, and it kind of creates that nice sound.
That's awesome, dude.
Yeah, so now I want to get into, so we were talking about the albums, and how you put it all together, with songs and with albums, and you were talking about similar sounds. Sorry, this is a long lead up, but basically, like, how many different kinds of instruments and different kind of sound effects, like spaceship sound effects, do you typically put in a track? And then are they consistent throughout the album?
On average, I average about 20 different sounds. I remember
Okay.
at the most I had like 80.
Oh my
And
gosh.
that was a lot. That was
Do you
like
remember what song that was?
Yes, you can actually hear that one. It's called Redeem.
Oh yeah.
It's got a picture of me in the fog, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, I've heard that one. They released that a few years ago, right?
Yeah, that was 2015.
Yeah. Wow. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yep, that one had about 80. It really maxed out my CPU.
Now that's a question I have actually. So you were talking about using a laptop before. Is that what you've been making all this music on?
Yep.
Wow.
That's crazy. Okay, so as a musical noob, what kind of specs do you need in a laptop, or like what kind of specs do you have in order to produce all this stuff?
So basically, you want as much as you can get.
Yeah.
And if I would recommend, like, if you're going to be working on music and you're planning on writing complicated stuff with a lot of tracks and stuff, I would recommend spending about $1,000 on a laptop. That way you don't run into CPU issues.
Yeah.
You can get by with like a $700-$600 laptop, but those are just harder. You kind of have to do little tricks and stuff to maximize your CPU load.
Gotcha.
How much like do these programs like take up, say, on, like, you know, while you're creating music?
So I have a cheaper laptop that I was able to get on sale, luckily. I really rely on my brother for specs and stuff. That's what I did with my first laptop, which was really good, and this laptop's pretty good too. So this one has like an AMD Ryzen 7 processor, and it's pretty good. I start to hit like 50% CPU at about like, because the strings take a lot of CPU because they're sample based.
Yeah.
So if you want to use more instruments, if you can lock down your melody and know what you want, you can render it to audio, and that uses less CPU.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome, man. So for your new album, which, how long ago did you release that?
July 27th, 2017.
Okay, nice. So it's been a little while.
Yep.
What were some of the challenging songs to write? What were some of the fun things to write that you discovered? I know you talk about how you discovered one of your favorite songs kind of by accident. Were there other things like that were difficult or also kind of fun?
Yeah, so one, I call it the Systems era. Systems was an album that never got released between Timelines and Army of Sound,
Yeah.
just because the quality of the songs wasn't that good and they just didn't sound that good. They were like good songs, but they weren't like classic stuff. So I try to rely stuff that's has a classic nature to it, something that has cohesion and longevity
Yeah.
for listening. So I wrote a song during that period that didn't see the light of day, but then for my Army of Sound album, it was able to get in because I looked at it again, this one particular song, like, oh, let's play with this a little bit. Let's add, because I upgraded my sound software from Complete. I upgraded from Complete 9 to Complete 11.
Gotcha.
And it came with better strings, better pianos. So I was able to take that old song and give it a better piano, better strings, and it turned out to be a good song. That song is called Rod and Staff.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. That one's kind of an epic, almost terrifying track. That's part of why I named it Rod and Staff, because it has this vibe like, oh, I'm scared.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually asked, I was going to Compass Bible Church Huntington Beach at the time when I released the Army of Sound album, and I asked the Sunday school guy in charge, like, hey, was Rod and Staff too scary? And he's like, no, I actually really liked that one.
Nice.
So yeah.
Nice. Well, that's awesome, man.
I also want to hear about like some of the most fun things that you've worked on. So like when you're working on a song, when does it hit that? Do you have a giddy moment of like, oh wow, I'm having a really good time writing this, or is it all pretty much like a challenge all the way through?
I would say most of the songs that I write that end up making the cut, I enjoyed making all the way through. If making a song is challenging, I'm usually like sitting there looking at the screen, like wondering what to do next. If that starts to happen too much, the song usually doesn't make it.
Gotcha.
For, I guess, a good example would be The Father Runs, because that one was like, it had the melodic material and it had the drop section in it, which had kind of the same progression. That one was only challenging because it had a lot of fade-ins and fade-outs like over a long period of time. So you have like, let's say 30 instruments and you're fading like half of them in. And then you fade most of them out towards the end.
Yeah.
To bare bones, just synthesizers and stuff. So that was hard. That took a while.
Yeah. Was there any particular song that really just, during the creation process, you just felt like really energized by making it and you just had like a blast?
I think He Is the Origin would be a good example because I had the talking and the voices for it. And I had a lot of fun doing really deep frequency shaping with the voices. And it was even fun like making the sharp sounds like the hisses and the pops.
Yeah.
And the voice quieter.
Do you feel like every time you write a song, it's like because you talked about like you play with things, you try new things. Do you feel like it's always a discovering process, or do you feel like you kind of have a formula that makes it a lot, like that you try to stick to?
So for me, the formula is write stuff until it works. So like if sometimes I feel like writing on a piano, and sometimes I feel like writing with strings first.
Yeah.
Or a synthesizer. So I would say having a formula is good to a certain extent. But if I were to give myself advice, a formula is good until you start making too much of the same stuff.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So I think the formula for me is just like keep writing and just keep writing until something clicks, something gets long enough. Because for me, if I'm writing a track and it sounds really good, but it's only 2 minutes long and I can't think of anything to add on to it, it's not going to work.
Yeah, gotcha.
So yeah, that brings up an interesting question. Does duration of a song play into it making the cut? Like you were just saying right now, if it's too short, it doesn't make the cut. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, big time. Yeah.
What's like the golden duration? Like you know what I mean? Like, is it like 3.5 minutes? You know what I mean? Like what is it?
3.5 minutes.
Oh my gosh. I need a prize. So one thing I want to talk about, and you mentioned this right at the top of the podcast, is where people can go to find your music.
Okay, cool. So it's ARMA space PUROS. I say Puros, but you can say Puros too. I don't mind. You can find that on SoundCloud, iTunes, Apple Music, Spotify, and Reverb Nation. Reverb Nation is special because it has older tracks that I don't have on Spotify. So if you're into hearing what I used to sound like, you can go there. I have a Twitter account, an Instagram account, and a Facebook.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Now, how important are these platforms in terms of like getting your work out there to be heard?
So Instagram has been a good tool for me because I can release artwork when I'm not releasing songs and kind of keep the crowd warmed up in that way. So I'm releasing stuff that people can see what I'm doing. If you guys have seen my Instagram, I typically like to release little designs that I make of eyes and glowing stuff.
Yeah, those are really fun,
Gotcha.
man.
Yeah.
Facebook has been helpful to kind of tell people when releases happen. In the future, I'm probably just going to be pushing to just my Arma Puros Facebook, and I might mention on my personal, like, hey guys, I have a musician page you can guys go follow, and if they want to follow that, then great.
Awesome, man.
Yeah, that's super cool. So now that we've heard about your albums, a couple of the singles that you've released, what are your plans for the future in creating some Arma Puros music?
So I haven't been writing music for a long time because I was dealing with my mental health. This time around, I was driving for Uber. Uber wasn't really working out, and I lost my car because I wasn't able to keep up with payments and stuff.
Gotcha.
And then I ended up in the hospital, and I was in the hospital for about 8 months.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I couldn't do anything really. I was thankful though the last portion of it, the 5 months. I was in a facility that allowed me to listen to iPods and stuff, so I was able to sing and listen to music and stuff, but I wasn't able to write. Gotcha. I'd kind of compare it to, I'm kind of like somebody who's like, I was working at the gym from like 2012 to 2018, like March-ish.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I stopped working out, as an example.
In terms of music?
Yeah. So I'm musically, like writing wise, I'm super out of shape. Sometimes I hardly feel like doing it even, to be honest. And so like yesterday what I did is I set a timer for like 15 minutes to just write for 15 minutes and see what happens. And I ended up writing for like 20, 30 minutes.
Nice.
Oh, that's great, man. Well, that's super cool. And I hope like this podcast interview can help re-inspire you to keep working, because your work is awesome.
Yeah.
And so as our transition into the end here, we got some questions for you from Instagram about your music.
Heyo!
So the first one, and this is why I say this, because number one, we are super grateful to have you on the podcast because your work really is awesome. And to prove that, on Instagram, what's up with that? Wrote, not even a question, but I love me some synthy jams. Good stuff.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, so that was the first one. I thought that was good. Okay, and then the next one, Charles the Moore asks, what are your inspirations for your creations?
Ooh.
I like that little poem there, Charles.
So I haven't been doing this as much lately. I've been branching out a little bit, but one of my things that I love is listen to your favorite music all the time. So that way, like, if you were to blend all of your favorite music, for me, it's like I'm blending all of the inspiration from my favorite music into what you hear as Arma Puros. So it's kind of like you go up to the soda machine, you grab some Dr. Pepper, grab some Diet Coca-Cola
Coke,
cherry.
Yeah.
It's a little tad of Sprite in there. And
I love these analogies, man. You're like the master. Now, and just to throw in another question here, what are some of those inspirations? Because I know, like, a while back when we were hanging out, it was like Coldplay, and there was like Skrillex in there. And I know we talked about this a little bit already, but what are a few other ones that you're throwing into Arma Puros?
So if you guys haven't heard of Seven Lions, he's a big inspiration for me, and some people even say my music sounds like his, so that was a compliment.
Nice.
Yeah, Seven Lions, Ember Island, they're kind of a band, but I definitely am inspired by them because they got this really chill vibe.
Nice.
And some of my music has been described as being chill, so that works. Yeah, check out Ember Island, check out Seven Lions. Let's see, who else? Sovereign Grace Music. I was playing a game, I was listening to Come Weary Saints. It's an older one from them. I really like that one. I don't know if you guys have heard of Bethel Music.
Oh, yeah, totally, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how these guys inspire my music because I'm not trying to copy them, but, you know, you end up writing what you like, and what you like may or may not sound like what you listen to some extent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you were talking about movies at the beginning, too. You know, it's like, this doesn't sound like the Lego movie, but it's about how it makes you feel, right?
Yeah. And I'm a big Chopin fan.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's Polish, so he's cool. I went to Poland one time way back. Oh, and I love country music.
Is that what got you into Taylor Swift, or were you kind of more on her pop scene side?
Well, I started listening to her when she was on the radio. Like, I just hear it and like, oh, cool. And then when I had my own money, I started buying my own music. And the first album I bought from her was her Speak Now album, and I really liked that one.
Nice.
Well, that's cool, man. Our last question from Instagram, since we talked about movies kind of at the beginning, I thought this was a good place to end it, is from my good friend Cassidy. He asks, what's your favorite original score from a movie?
Sound of Music, hands down.
Really?
Yeah.
Can you describe kind of like what qualities about that specific soundtrack really speak to you?
So The Sound of Music is kind of like a story about a woman trying to find her place in the world and stuff, and she finds it. So the music is really like super upbeat and really encouraging and inspiring. And I really like the melodies, and Roger and Hammerstein's composed it. So yeah.
Just to follow that up, it's almost like it's the feeling that it gives you of that hopefulness, that like you're searching, but there's like an excitement in that search, and then at the end there's that like completeness kind of a feeling. Is that kind of what speaks to you? Yeah,
I think so. I think the mood of the music and the words and the melodies are really inspiring.
Gotcha.
Well, that's super cool, dude. I mean, it's been so cool to hear about your inspirations, like where you've come from. It's cool for me to see, too, your Instagram, because knowing you as a visual artist first, I love to see that you're still drawing, so that's awesome. But hearing about your music, we've been wanting to get you on the podcast for a long time, so we're super grateful that you've taken time out of your day to talk to us about what you do.
Thank you so much. You guys have been awesome.
Yeah, man. Come back sometime.
All right, I will.
Yeah, I know. We got to hang out again. It's been too long.
It'd be great.
For sure.
Well, cool, dude. And so I want everyone to check out online, Arma Puros. Kevin already mentioned where you guys can check that out. We'll be promoting him on Instagram, as well as artists that we met at Ground Zero Animation Expo, and we'll talk about that in a second. But thanks again, Kevin, for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Wow. Wow, that was great.
No, it really was. I really am glad to have Kevin on. So we're talking about something other than just animation on the podcast, because this really is for all artists.
This isn't an animated podcast.
But really great stuff. Like I had said in the podcast, everyone do check out Kevin's work online. That's Arma Puros on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify. And he's also on Instagram. Check out his visual art there as well.
While you're on Instagram, we got some more artist shout-outs. We really need, we're moving on. All right. The first one that we want to shout out is a storyboard artist by the name of Alan Huynh. He goes by Alan Huynh Works on Instagram, and I gotta say, his little icon of himself is freaking amazing.
Yeah, Alan's freaking amazing. I actually met him while we were both working at Stupid Buddy Studios, so I'm still there. He's been doing storyboards for Final Space, so check that show out too, and check out his work online. That's Alan Huynh Works.
Oh, we got our friend Daniel Jungenberg.
Yeah.
I hope that's how you say that.
I guess we'll find out next episode, because he's our next guest.
Whoa! A little teaser. You can find out him on Instagram at That Sushi Shirt Kid. That's right, That Sushi Shirt Kid.
Yeah, he's got character designs, he's got fashion design, which we'll have to talk to him about when he gets on, and some abstract art as well, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, very talented guy, very talented shirt.
And next up is someone we met, once again, at Ground Zero.
Hello.
And that is Maddie W., who goes by Lottie Doodles. So it's La_DDI_Doodles. She's got amazing character design on there, some great phys dev stuff. We're looking at right now some amazing hair design drawings, some digital art. So everyone do check out her work. It's really fantastic.
Also, she has 5 library cards. Next up, we got a character designer / illustrator by the name of Bryn Sparling. At the least, that's their Instagram name, Bryn Sparling Art. That's BRYNN Sparling Art.
And how could you forget Bryn Sparling? She was one of the winners of our sketchbook raffle at the Ground Zero Animation Expo.
I look like an idiot.
But yeah, really check out Bryn Sparling's art online. And next up are 2 people from Latinx in animation, and Latinx is a fantastic network of artists who are looking to get people who are underrepresented in the arts and the animation field, in the animation industry. And so one of the founders of that is I am Eas, or I am Ellis. I should have asked her how to pronounce that Instagram handle.
I believe her name is Magdiela Duhamel.
Yes. She's fantastic. I've met her before at several events. You can always recognize the pink hair. And yeah, really do check out her work. Not only Latinx, but she also was just working on the movie Ugly Dolls. So that's pretty cool. That just came out this year. And also on the Fritz, or Haley Fritz, we also met at Ground Zero. also with Latinx. What they're doing with Latinx really is worth checking out. So I hope all you guys get the chance.
And again, that's on_the_Fritz_.
Well, cool. Yeah, it was really great talking to Kevin, and I really hope you guys can check out his work online as well as the people that we shouted out. And until we get on to Daniel, whatever his last name is.
Until then, keep on doing the art. It's never gonna land.
Yeah.
I know.